highlight the value of KYP, knowing your people and understanding them, and how that makes you a better chief of staff.
Well, I will have to say, as I've been doing this for 44 years, and being able to do the strengths work is what you're referring to, has been, again, another game changer for Duncanville ISD. Because we were able to not only learn our own top 5 strengths, and now we're working on the second 5, learning those and owning those, but also to really realize how everyone who comes to the table, who's on our district leadership or our senior leadership team, learning what their top 5 strengths are, to be able to see how we can work together.
Hi, my name is Dr. Mark Smith, and I'm superintendent of Duncanville ISD, and this is my podcast, Super Intentional. My name is Mark Smith, and I'm superintendent in Duncanville ISD, and this is my podcast, Super Intentional. You know, I always say that everything rises or falls based on the leader. And leadership matters. And so today I am so excited to have one of the awesome leaders in Duncanville ISD, and that is Miss Andre Fields. She is the chief of staff, and we got to talk about what that means. That's a hard job, especially if it means kind of trying to take care of me. I'm sure that might be a challenge sometimes. But I'm so happy to have you here today.
Well, Dr. Smith, I am delighted to be here and to be a part of your podcast. This is the first for me, so I'm really excited.
Well, leadership is so critical. We talk about that so much in Duncanville ISD. This school year, heading into this school year, actually, I was so excited because we made a structure change in our school district in terms of the organizational structure. And part of it was because I needed someone to be right by my side. It's like, Batman needs a Robin.
Yes.
Well, I needed a Robin to help me manage so many aspects in the school district. And there was no one better based on your experience, which we won't talk about here in a little bit, to really provide that level of support that I needed. And so your role as chief of staff in Duncanville is so very critical to me and the entire district. I kind of want to start off by saying, how's it been? That could really be the whole show. But how has it been?
Well, first of all, thank you again, as always, for entrusting me with the responsibility of chief and staff. And I believe that it has gone very, very well. Yes, we did make some structural changes within our leadership format. And for me, I think it's been a game changer for myself, for you in particular, because you're now able to do some things that you possibly were not able to do prior. And then for our team, our senior leadership team in particular, I think it's been a game changer for them. And we hope that it transfers all the way down from the superintendent's office to the classroom, which is really what really matters.
Well, I think it's important for our audience to just get a sense of, your experience, because that's really key to how effective you're able to be as a chief of staff. I could go on. I'm trying to hold myself back just because I know the value that you add, and I really want you to highlight your experiences that you had prior to coming to Duncanville and over a really long career. I won't say the number. I'll let you say the number.
Right.
But a really long career that has uniquely positioned you to provide leadership in the role that you serve now in the district.
Yes, sir. I am so excited first to announce that this is my 44th year of service to public education. And I really believe, Dr. Smith, that this job is a calling for me. It is not something that I started off when I was a high school senior. I'm going to be honest, I really wanted to be an attorney. I've had a chance to use some of that, by the way,
Absolutely.
that thought process. But really, this is the year 44. My experience is very wide range. Of course, like most of us in education, I started off as a classroom teacher, really at middle school level in special education. Of the former district where I worked many years. Matter of fact, 37 of my 44 were in another district. And from the classroom, I was there a very short time. I went into high school admin, which meant I was an assistant principal at a very large and comprehensive high school. And from there, I returned back to the special education work for a little while and became an elementary principal, became director of human resources, became the executive director of HR. And then from there, my prior job before coming to Duncanville and joining the amazing Duncanville family, I was the deputy superintendent. Now, with that meant I was responsible, kind of like I am now, it's a different term, a different title, but basically the chief of staff and working to support the superintendent in all of his initiatives, all the work that we wanted to do. So I feel like I even served a couple of times as the interim superintendent. So I gotta feel a little bit about what it means to be in that seat. I think I did that twice for about 6 or 7 months. So maybe I have a year and 2-3 months as a superintendent or acting superintendent. So
Well, that is an awesome track record. It speaks volumes of your work and your productivity and your consistency of success over a long period of time in multiple places.
Yes.
So you can see how valuable that is to me and to our district to help manage everything that we are engaged in.
Yes, sir.
So your role as chief of staff is absolutely critical. Now, what about what is it like to be the chief of staff?
Well, I would akin it to being the person that is responsible for making sure that, one, the staff has what they need to be able to listen, do a lot of communicating, work through problem solving. I was just sharing this on last week when I was working with a team member. I feel like part of my role, one, is to support, obviously to serve, to communicate, to listen, which is part of communicating, and then to help solve problems so that the staff is the best we can have and the best staff to be able to serve our students. And so I always go back to, one, what's in it for our students, the best decisions that are made, being able to gather information, research, being able to bring to you things that are critical to your role as superintendent so that you can make, if we need a final decision on something. But the other piece of being chief of staff for me is to be able to minimize those things that you have to get in the weeds on, that we can solve on our own as a team, and then take leadership of that.
You know, leadership, so much of being an effective leader is about conflict resolution, and that's a unique skill set that not everybody has. You do an outstanding job of resolving conflict, but for us, when I think about being super intentional about solving conflicts, because this is a people business, we talk about that, and anytime you bring people together, there's probably going to be some conflict sometimes,
Yes, sir.
or maybe all the time, I don't know, but there's going to be some conflict.
Yes.
And as a leader, we can't shy away from that. You are excellent, an excellent example for leaders on how to resolve conflict. What do you think has given you success in terms of being able to navigate conflict like you do?
I think for me, and when I think about conflict resolution and being able to really navigate that, one, it is a skill that I've learned over time of practicing it. And if you want to talk about formalized conflict resolution, we know that there's a skill or an art. I think for me is, one, I listen. Listening is so critical because, and I don't have a made up mind about whether someone's wrong or right, but to be able to listen to the facts, listen to how people are perceiving whatever the conflict is, and then being able to help them to manage. When you think about conflict, a lot of times it's egos get in the way, personalities get in the way, people want to have their way gets in the way. And so being able to work with staff members and team members to really resolve, this is not about I, this is about we, this is about Duncanville, this is about the group, what's best for our staff and what's best for our students. And of course, again, a lot of practice. Over 44 years, you get a chance to practice this quite a bit. When being a campus principal, whether it's the team having an issue, the third grade team, or whether it's the high school administrative team, being able to be that point and just really being, I guess I would say, sometimes the voice of reason in the room.
You and I have so many conversations on a daily basis about leadership. You said something, you talked about listening. Sometimes as leaders, we're so focused on talking and getting our message out when really part of being an effective communicator is to have the ability to listen and internalize and have an awareness of what's going around you so that when you do get ready to communicate, you now can position yourself to make impact. That's what you do exceptionally well, and we benefit from that in our school district. When I think about like leadership and the years that you've seen, you talked about how much you've worked with people and resolved conflict. And then when you think about your role as the chief of staff here in Duncanville ISD, have you seen, certain conflicts that could have been much more of a negative impact on the system, but because of what you've put in place and your ability to listen and then be able to navigate how you need to handle that, helped prevent something that could have been so large to now something that's controllable? That's important for the audience that are in leadership roles, because controlling those things are important. You can't always prevent something from happening,
right?
But it's how you manage and control it after it happens. Can you speak to that?
I can. I really totally agree with what you're saying, because if we are, and I feel like this, Dr. Smith, I keep my ear to the rail. Mm-hmm. And because I do that, and what does that mean? That means that I'm listening intentionally to things that perhaps start off as something that appears to be small, but that could really bubble up and become a problem, not only for a large team, but even for our system. So one being, when I talk about leadership, leading by walking around like Abe Lincoln did, right. Being present, sometimes even those check-ins where people will say, oh, I see Ms. Fields today. I want to mention this to her. Hey, can I talk to you? So being able to make myself available, knowing that I am open to listening and keeping my ear to the rail to prevent something from falling off the rail, which could impact and derail the school district. And we do not want that. We want it to be the place where people feel heard. I also use a lot of empathy in regard to situations where people come. For sometimes you'll minimize something and say, oh, that's nothing. But for that individual person or that team, being able to empathize, really listen, and help them understand and problem solve sometimes their own problems. Yes.
As a leader, have you seen, in this environment that we're in, we're still really dealing with the impact of COVID. And rightfully so, we focus a lot on the impact it's had on our students, but it's also had an impact on our adults. And I wonder, in your role as chief of staff of working with so many different groups, so many different departments, and having a big scope of how adults have been able to manage, has that empathy piece resonated maybe more so than in the past during these last couple of 2-3 years?
Well, I'm sure as everyone who's probably going to be listening to this will know, these last 2.5 years, almost 3 now, have been very challenging for our staff. And being empathetic and really listening to what people are going through, particularly when we're talking about our staff members, because they're bringing those things that have happened to them, whether it's related to COVID-19, all the things that happen in our economy, the political landscape, everything that people bring in their families to work, it impacts the work. And so, yes, indeed, being empathetic to people and really listening. There have been a lot suffering of a lot of loss, whether it was a loss of a loved one, loss of where they lived, loss of their lifestyle. There were so many changes that happened. And of course, for me, really thinking about teachers who had to come to work each and every day, or staff members who had to come to work every day when they had things they were dealing with at home, yet they had to come. We expected them to perform. We expected them to teach our kids the best that they could, and in an environment in which we asked them to teach in different ways. So being empathetic, putting myself in that doesn't mean being sympathetic.
Right.
We do have sympathy, but also to really look at it from where they sit and being able to help them. One, say it's okay. It's okay to not be okay sometimes, and for what we do as a chief of staff and then our district to provide those resources and tools to be able to help our folks. So that's been really a key thing.
That is so needed, and
Yes.
we see it in our district on a regular basis.
Yes.
And I'm fortunate that our team is very intentional about having just an awareness of how important it is to have empathy. As a chief of staff, there are so many, we touched on this, there are so many areas that you're responsible for. A leader has to be able to prioritize and know what demands immediate attention, or what is something that can be maybe at a lower level of engagement and involvement. You do a great job of that. So, for other leaders, potential leaders that are in our audience, what kind of things do you do as a chief of staff to prioritize how you're going to allocate your time, your energy, and your efforts?
Well, one of the things we say at Duncanville is people first, process second.
Absolutely.
So first of all, the things that are going to impact people, and if they're going to impact people greatly, those are priorities for me. And as you can imagine, in the course of a day, with all the things, there are so many departments, so many people pulling at you. I'm intentional about my calendar, my schedule, and also having reflection time. And I think leaders don't always do that. If we're busy all the time, we feel like we're working, but busyness is not equated to actually getting things done. So really looking at the people first, what is urgent with people. And sometimes we do have a crisis or an emergency, and so that will get my attention. But on the day-to-day, looking at the time that I spend really engaging one-on-one with staff members, and I have a calendar of those people that's part of my responsibility to work with them, to meet with them, to make sure that I do what I can to support them, whatever their project or process that they're working on. And then comes the process. We can't have this business without process, but I also know what is the process. I don't want it to be a barrier, something that's going to keep us from getting the work done, but looking at it from that lens of what's the people first, the process second, and then having some time to reflect and think, and looking at it from the long range, that we're not just in it in that day, in that moment, because we're already thinking about next year and the changes that we need to make. And so that, I would say, that's my priority. Sometimes we have important but not urgent. Sometimes we have urgent and it is very important. And sometimes we just have those things that are just natural that come with the work that we do every day. So people come at probably my priorities. That's what I would say about it.
As leaders, we don't always value the reflection component as much as I think we should, because a lot of times we're so engaged in the work, we're so engaged in the immediate fire that's present before us right at this moment in time, that we don't take the time and the space to reflect on how the day went, how is my schedule going, have I given enough time to maybe the school board if you're a superintendent or the community. That's one of the values of having a chief of staff that is as effective as you are. It allows me the space to have that reflection time. And that's important for
Yes.
leaders, because you got to step away from the work to be able to think about the work.
Right.
And that's hard to do for leaders, but I think the leaders that are intentional about doing that are much more proactive in their work versus reactive.
Right.
Part of what your role is the vision. You're the caretaker of the vision. And so kind of walk me through how we communicate.
Yes.
And how important that is so that we are aligned in our efforts.
Yes, sir. And true, as far as the caretaker of the vision, being able to make sure that everything we do, being very intentional, is lined up with our mission and our vision, our values as Duncanville. So it allows me on the day-to-day running interference, so to speak, offensive line, if you want to say it, running interference so that we can really reach what the vision is on a day-to-day basis. And I think if the audience is listening, there's not a day that goes by that we do not connect, where we talk about looking at it from the big picture. What's happening out there? What do I need to be aware of? The responsibility of leading our senior leadership team has allowed me, one, to continue to have the vision in front of those senior leaders. Two, we have a system where you review those notes that from our meetings, so that if there are things that need to be, a decision that needs to be made, you're able to do that. Or if you tell us, yes, let's move forward. So in engaging in our meetings once a week, where we're able to debrief, talk about it, and always go back to what does this mean for Duncanville ISD, which is, of course, making sure that our students have the best education possible.
Yeah. We have this saying called KYP, and it means, know your people.
Yes.
And part of a chief of staff, you got to know your people.
Yes.
And so we spent some time over the last couple of years learning what our top 5 strengths are as individuals, but then also what the strengths are of other leaders in the district, whether it's a principal or a senior leader or director. Has there been value of, and if so, highlight the value of KYP, knowing your people and understanding them, and how that makes you a better chief of staff?
Well, I will have to say, as I've been doing this for 44 years, and being able to do the strengths work is what you're referring to, has been, again, another game changer for Duncanville ISD. Because we were able to not only learn our own top 5 strengths, and now we're working on the second 5, learning those and owning those, but also to really realize how everyone who comes to the table, or who's on our district leadership or our senior leadership team, learning what their top 5 strengths are, to be able to see how we can work together. As you can imagine, there are a lot of commonalities with leaders that are on our team, but there are also some things that are very different and unique to each person. It brings a unique perspective, because when I'm working with someone who has a different strength than I do, and this is operating of how they do their work, it helps us to connect people who we call powerful pairs, to be able to work together when we want to execute something, if you've asked us to work on a project. So it really has highlighted, one, the individuality, the uniqueness of the individuals, and then how collectively we draw from the synergy and the energy from the strengths that we all have.
Yeah. Giving kind of like a real practical, real life example of how this works for us. You did an excellent job when we made the change in the leadership structure.
Yes.
Some of the staff had a real hard time adjusting to the change because of a lot of reasons. And we have a lot of strong personalities, and that's a good thing in leadership.
Yes.
But I think for the audience, for leaders to know, I think because all of us deal with team dynamics.
Correct.
And trying to get everyone to function as a team, even though you may have different strengths and different personalities, you handle that so well. And I think there's value in how you chose to handle some of the personalities. And I want to see if you can speak to that.
Well, of course, I would say at the beginning kind of a challenge. And when I say a challenge, it was a challenge for me personally. And I'll speak to that first, because I had been their peer. The people that are on the team, and for the sake of the talk today, I became many of those individual supervisors within a matter of a few minutes. And so what I did, again, being intentional, one, I met with each person individually, and one of my top strengths is individualization. It is my top strength. I see the potential and uniqueness in individuals, and I like to do a lot of work one-on-one. So I took that ball and ran with my top strength to meet with them, review their strengths, ask a series of questions. It was not just willy-nilly. It was very intentional of the questions I asked. How could I support them? How could I help them leverage their strengths? And then to let them know that they had access to me, but to also assure them that we're still one team Duncanville, and they would still have an opportunity to have a dialogue with you. I did a lot of listening, what I can do, where they felt like our team, where we could grow and build trust and strengthen trust with one another. And I spent a lot of time working at it. As a matter of fact, the work continues. It is not done.
So after about almost 2 years of engaged in this work, would you say it's been valuable and we've seen the impact of the work, and are we trending in a much better fashion in terms of our cohesiveness and ability to work together as a team?
I would say that is completely accurate, Dr. Smith. I see such, a lot of the strengths deal with communication, trusting one another, building camaraderie, and being able to work together to execute the things that we have. I see us having grown so much because I understand where you're coming from. We laugh about it a lot of times when someone makes a comment, if we're working and having a discussion, and we'll say, oh, that's their deliberative strength. That's that strength where a person's always thinking, what could go wrong, and they're always planning for that. Or if it's someone who perhaps has a communication strength, they want to talk about it. Or someone who has a context strength, which means they're going to ask a lot of questions. And we need all of those, and that's just to name a few, to be able to really work together to get the work done, and then, of course, secure what we're trying to say is the vision for our district. So much better place.
We talk about how emotion trumps logic. We talk about that all the time.
Yes, sir.
That sometimes, it could be very logical why we're doing this, but the emotion gets in the way. I wonder, for you as a leader, how are you able to maintain your focus and your discipline of problem solving in the midst of some highly charged issues that we all have to deal with, where the emotions are on level 10?
Well, I think for me, and of course, I have a philosophy, Dr. Smith. One, and I may have shared this with you probably when we first, so I first started working in Duncanville. I'm this way: nothing's the end of the world but the end of the world, and that keeps me centered always. Being reasonable about things, and sometimes people think, oh my goodness, this is the end of the world, this is the end of the whatever. And for me to be able to step back, experience helps with that, I believe. And then knowing I've been in some heated situations where we were able to listen, to problem solve, to offer sage advice, because experience does speak. But also just to not really let that drive what I do. Being reasonable and rational and being able to listen and try to calm other people, say, this is going to be okay. And I know in some emotionally charged situations, they probably want me to get more emotional about something, but I'm really trying to really be the person who says, okay, let's see what else we can do. How can we solve this issue, whatever it is, especially if it's an emotional charge issue. And most of the time it is personalities that have gotten in the way, egos, dynamics like that, of people wanting to have their way, and being able to bring everybody together. Sometimes they're not ready to talk, Dr. Smith. They're
Right.
ready. We need to have a pause so that people can have time to gather themselves so that we can work through whatever the issues are.
You know, in your 44 years of education, you've seen a lot. And, you know, I think there's value in your perspective because we think about, you know, what does it take to be an effective leader? You know, I want to be an effective leader. I feel like, you know, even in my own growth, it's a journey. I've never arrived. I'm just trying to get better. And I wonder, are there things that you can share that you've seen over 44 years of working with a lot of different leaders? You know, are there some common traits, characteristics, behaviors that you have seen that produce consistency as a leader?
Well, first of all, I consider myself as a servant leader. And what that means for me is that the people matter, relationships matter. And so I have spent my entire career working towards being a servant leader to serve the people. That's my call. There are, of course, all kinds of different types of leaders, but I think the constant things for me, consistency over time, is one, you never stop growing. That's one of the things. I've been doing this for a long time,
Right.
but I continue to want to hunger and thirst after growth, to be better. What the leader I was, I'm ashamed, 40 years ago, and who I am now, because I've continued to have a growth mindset. Mindset matters for leaders. It is how you think that really translates into what you do. Of course, people, I'm going to put that there. The other thing that I would think is that we have to continue to research on the best practices for leaders. Leadership in the 70s is very different than leadership in 2022, obviously. And then just really continue to sharpen our saw, continue to become more effective communicators and learners. You want to have style, but you want to have substance. We've talked about that. Some people have all style and no substance. We want both because no one wants the substance and not the style. So we have to manage both of those. But I think caring about what we do, especially in public education, the skill set for a leader of a for-profit business is a little different. But when you think about all the great leaders, whether we talk about some of them, I won't name names, but some of the great leaders of companies that we know, people want to work for, et cetera. They have, the people at heart. This business is a heart business, and what we're doing, and again, I think those are some of the commonalities that I would share.
You know, I always ask this question, you know, to people when I'm getting ready to onboard them in Duncanville. I kind of ask them, well, why Duncanville?
Right.
But I kind of change that. For you, what do you like about working in Duncanville? You mentioned you spent the majority of your career, 37 years, in one district.
Yes.
And I was fortunate that I was able to influence you enough that you came to help me.
Yes.
And I so appreciate that our district is better because you're here. But, you know, what are your thoughts on just what is it that you like about working in Duncanville, even some of the more challenging things?
Well, first of all, I think for me, just the heart of our leader, first of all, because your heart has always been with the people and the students. You want to make their lives better. That aligns with who I am as a servant leader. Secondly, this is a great community. Community dynamics couldn't be better. The people in the community love the schools. They want what's best for the students. They really will give. And so having the heart of the community as part of the school district. Then thirdly, if I look internally, it is the people. That's why I get up every day. The people who are here, the people who serve, even with the challenges, when you look at it globally and holistically, the people. And then, of course, I cannot leave out our tremendous, outstanding students. We have some of the greatest students. In my previous district, there were some great students there, but Duncanville really has some outstanding students. I was sharing last week, I think, or so with the Inspiring Leadership Academy and sharing about servant leadership. And I told them that my favorite day of the school year is not the first day of school, but it is graduation day, because then I see all the culmination of all the things we poured and invested into those young people, and knowing they're going to go out and change the world. And so that's my favorite day of the year, of the school year.
That is so awesome. We are so blessed and fortunate to have you here in Duncanville ISD. I am so blessed and fortunate to have you on the team, and your work is just amazing. The work that you're doing, wisdom is so important. We talk about that too in terms of leadership, and you do bring that wisdom and that focused thinking that is so important to me as a superintendent, as I'm dealing with a lot of different things. And so having my right hand, if you will, assist me in that fashion is just so beneficial. Any closing thoughts for leaders out there in our conversation today that you want to use this opportunity to share?
Well, I would probably close with this, that the opportunity to serve and make a difference in the lives of children is a great and tremendous calling. I would say personally, education changed my life. And I was a product of segregated schools. When I started, I was a product of segregated schools. It was prior to integration. And even after integration, knowing the difference that education was going to play in my life. My father had a 5th grade education, yet my mother was able to continue to instill in us what a difference a quality education made. And so the heart for that, and knowing that the future really rests in our hands and our lives and the work we do every day. If we really think about why we come to the office, why we drive up, why we show up, it is to make a difference in the life of a child. And I hope that's my legacy.
Wow, that is so awesome. You do it so very well. I hope that I can leave a legacy like that in Duncanville. As you can see, we are so blessed and fortunate to have a chief of staff, but not just that, a leader such as Mrs. Fields in our district. The wisdom she provides, the ability to be able to communicate and have awareness, those things that we talked about today, they are so critical for any leader, any person that's doing leadership work. And, this is what we talk about in our podcast. We want to be super intentional. As I say, leadership matters, and everything rises or falls based on the leader. It has been such a pleasure listening to you share such awesome nuggets about leadership. I've been encouraged today. I know our audience has been encouraged today. I am Dr. Mark Smith, Superintendent of Duncanville ISD, and this is my podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Super Intentional with Dr. Mark Smith. Go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening on audio platforms, be sure to subscribe and rate the episodes. Follow us on all social media platforms.